I'm Charles Sabatos, and this is the second part of my story, The Merchant of Oz. Chapter 3. Well, I'm back from my journey, Ozma, the wizard called out cheerily. Princess Ozma and Professor H.M. Wogglebug were sitting out on the terrace enjoying luncheon. Oh, wizard, the professor called. Ozma told me that you were taking your dear little creatures back to their parents. Why, yes, said the wizard. I rode the sawhorse down the road back through the Munchkin country. We went through the thickest forest you could imagine, and right in the middle of a clearing was their house, Grunter and Squealina Swine. Quite charming and intelligent for pigs. They were delighted to see their children again, of course, but they had gotten used to living without the piglets. One night was quite enough for them. They've allowed me to keep the piglets as long as I wish. Splendid, exclaimed the Wogglebug, trying to hide this disappointment on his face. Well, how are things going at the College of Art and Athletic Perfection? The wizard asked jovially. Actually, replied the professor, I've been meaning to talk to you. Things are getting quite out of hand. My students are forced to study every day, which takes away valuable time from athletics. Now I've come up with an idea. Perhaps you could help me invent some pills which students could ingest to give them instant knowledge. Why, Professor, Ozma said, the wizard has returned from a long, grueling journey. No, it's all right, dear, the wizard assured her. So has anything happened during the one day I was gone? Why, yes, said Ozma gravely. Do you remember Boldkey, the Munchkin merchant who recently moved into the city? His daughter is that lovely young girl named Margolotte. Oh, of course, said the wizard. Well, while Boldkey was away last evening, Margolotte eloped. When he returned, he found only a note on her table. Naturally, he's very upset. Can't he find her? Asked the wizard. If he's that worried, perhaps you can let him use the magic picture. I don't know, Ozma said. I think he might be angry enough to cause her serious harm. Oh dear, said the wizard. What a complicated situation. He turned to the Wogglebug. Would you like to come up to my laboratory? We could begin work on these pills of yours right away. A superb idea, wizard, exclaimed Wogglebug. He rose with dignity from his chair, and the two bustled off, leaving Princess Ozma deep in thought. The next day, Ozma sat in her boudoir looking over various plans and projects when Jellia Jam entered the room and began vigorously dusting. The maid looked over at the table holding the 3 magic boxes. Why, Your Majesty, she said, hasn't anyone picked the right one yet? Ozma looked up briefly. No, I'm afraid not, she said. The royal reception is in just 2 weeks, and I'm afraid that I'll have to choose an escort myself. But I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Oh, what a bother it's all been. Jellia Jam spoke up timidly. Might I try the magic boxes? Ozma looked up in surprise. Why, of course, I suppose so. You are just as entitled to try them as anyone is. The maid smiled gleefully. Terrific. I've been wanting to try them for so long. She walked toward the table. Perhaps I should pick the emerald. No, that might be too obvious. Well, maybe the silver one? The gold would be much too conspicuous. But what if the gold was so bright that everyone would think that everyone else would pick it, but really nobody would? She whirled triumphantly. I picked the gold one. Ozma's face was expressionless as she handed the golden key to Jellia Jam. The maid bit her lower lip as she took it and slid it into the keyhole. As Jellia opened the lid, a golden scroll rose from inside into the air. It slowly unrolled, revealing the words, 3 boxes sit before your eyes, their contents you had to surmise. The only thing that matters now is that you picked it right somehow, and the journey to Ix will be your prize. Jellia jumped up and down. Does that mean I've won? Ozma nodded. Another ruler might have been disappointed that the contest had been won by a servant girl, even one so important as Jellia Jam. But Ozma was so kind and such a democratic monarch that she congratulated Jellia on her good luck. Oh, I can't believe it, Jellia exclaimed. I've never been on vacation in my life. I'm so excited. Wait until the scullery maids hear about this. Giggling joyfully, she dashed from the room. 2 weeks of busy preparations went by, and Ozma now stood with Jellia Jam beside her on a tall, raised platform before the castle. She waved to the hundreds of her subjects who had gathered before her. "Farewell, my citizens," she said. "I shall be in the kingdom of Ix for some time, as you know. I am leaving the Wizard of Oz to rule during my absence. I wish the best of luck to all of you. Goodbye." She touched her hands to her waist. Underneath her ceremonial robes was the magic belt, and murmured a command, with Jellia holding to her arm with one hand. Instantly, the two disappeared. A chorus of farewells and applause rang out long after she had gone. A day later, the wizard was riding the red wagon along the Winky yellow brick road. Not far ahead, he spotted a cluster of workmen. In the center, looking forgivably self-important, was Jack Pumpkinhead. Seeing his good friend, the wizard ordered the sawhorse to stop. The wooden steed obeyed, and the wizard stepped down. Jack rushed over to meet him. "Hi, wizard, isn't it wonderful?" he asked. "We're planting the last bunch right now. See the one in the center? It's the biggest one. I've decided to carve it out and keep it as my house." "It looks very comfortable," the wizard agreed. "Oh, everything's going splendidly," Jack rattled on. "This was a wonderful idea. I only hope we can get the money to pay it off." The wizard chatted for some time with the Pumpkinhead and then continued on his journey through the countryside. He stopped near the construction site of Nick Chopper's palace, but the whole area around it was a morass of mud. Sighing, the wizard had the sawhorse pull the wagon over to the side of the road and stop. The Tin Woodman saw him and hurried over. "Hello," he said. "Why have you stopped over?" "Oh, I was just getting used to ruling the country again, if only for a few weeks," the wizard said airily. "I was off on a jaunt through the Winky country and thought I'd see how things were going." "I guess things are going all right. We're digging the foundation now." "Then what's wrong?" the wizard asked straightforwardly. "What do you mean?" "I know something's been bothering you because you haven't been yourself since the project was begun." "Who have I been, Glinda?" "I'm sorry, wizard. It's just that things aren't going as easily as I'd hoped. Tin is rarer than gold, and finding good quality in sufficient quantities, whew, and most of my craftsmen have never worked on a project this large. I'm thinking of abandoning the project and staying in the same old drafty castle. Everything's costing so much more than I'd expected. I only hope that Jack managed to get the money to pay off his own loan." "That's funny," said the wizard. "Jack was just telling me a few minutes ago that he hasn't paid off the loan." "What?" the Tin Woodman exclaimed. "The entire loan must be paid off by today, or I shall owe Boldkey 1 pound of tin. Hurry, get into the red wagon, and we'll all go back to the Emerald City to get this mess straightened out." Sometime later, the wagon pulled up beside the new palace stables. The wizard, the Tin Woodman, and Jack Pumpkinhead, whom they had picked up on the way back, climbed out quickly. "Why, hello, wizard," called the Scarecrow. "You're back sooner than I'd expected. Nick, Jack, what's up?" "The opposite of down," the Emperor of the Winkies replied shortly. "We're here to see Boldkey on some important business." "Oh, say, have you heard news about Boldkey? It's spreading through the castle like wildfire." The Scarecrow shivered at his own simile. "Well, what is it?" Jack Pumpkinhead asked. "Boldkey's daughter Margolot apparently eloped with an old magician named Nicodic. Some Gillikin farmer had heard about the large reward money that Boldkey had offered, and he saw the newlyweds going past his property, so he chased them. He cornered them at the edge of a deep ravine, and they jumped right into it." "So what? No one can die in Oz," Jack said. "It was a bottomless canyon," the Scarecrow corrected. "Boldkey is almost beside himself with anger and grief." "Poor man," said the wizard. "I can hardly blame him." Nick Chopper and Jack just looked at each other in shock. The Tin Woodman knocked nervously on the door of Boldkey's lavish home. "I hope he's not too angry," he said. Boldkey flung open the door. "What do you want?" he cried. "Oh, Mr. Boldkey," quavered Jack Pumpkinhead, "we just wanted to tell you how sorry we are for your loss." "Ah, yes, gentlemen, I take it you've come to pay back the remainder of the money due me." "Actually," the Tin Woodman said, "we wouldn't be able to do that today. We've come to ask you for an indefinite extension." "You want me to do what?" the merchant roared, that is ridiculous, out of the question. I was generous enough to lend you a substantial amount of my wealth, and you were too lazy to even bother paying me back the money when it is due? But Mr. Boldkey, no, I will not listen to any whimpering, exclaimed the merchant. He turned toward the stunned Wizard of Oz. I am addressing my grievance to you, the temporary ruler of the Emerald City. I demand justice. The wizard did not know what to do. During the 50 years in which he had reigned over the Emerald City, nothing had happened to his authority. Now, on only the second day of his brief second tenure, a dreadful crisis had already arisen. He was torn between supporting an old friend and condoning a breakdown of all law and order in the Emerald City. I want Nick Chopper imprisoned in my home until he will pay the pound of tin, Boldkey insisted. Well, I suppose so, stammered the wizard. Just then, Jack Pumpkinhead pulled through with one of his rare bursts of intelligence. Nick Chopper deserves a trial, he proclaimed. He's entitled to one. Remember, Eureka the kitten had one on Dorothy's last visit. I remember, said the Tin Woodman. I will comply with Boldkey's wishes, as he cannot do me any harm. But please hold the trial soon. And who shall preside over the trial in Ozma's absence? Asked the wizard. Why, you, of course, said the Pumpkinhead. You were the highest ranking official in the city. Asked the wizard. That is fine with me, since I have every legal right to this bond, said the Munchkin. Notify me of the date. The Tin Woodman turned toward his comrades. Please watch over my kingdom. Do not tell my subjects of my imprisonment unless it is absolutely necessary. I'm really sorry about all of this, Nick, said Jack. The Tin Woodman glanced back at him with a kindly smile. Then Boldkey closed the door between them. Come, said the wizard, we must get back to the palace and tell the Scarecrow. Oh, Princess Ozma, said Jellia Jam as the two prepared for bed in the palace of Ix. I've had such a marvelous time meeting Queen Zixie in person. I never dreamed I'd do such a thing. And the grand banquet in 3 days' time, I can hardly wait. Princess Ozma looked up from a small mirror, which she had been intently studying. I'm sorry, Jellia, but we have a slight change of plans. What? Asked the maid. Ask one of the busboys if he has any extra clothing, and in the morning I will have to convey my regrets to Queen Zixie. But why? Gasped Jellia. Ozma smiled sympathetically. I'm really sorry, Jellia, but I'm afraid we won't be attending the banquet after all. Chapter 4. Is the Tin Woodman here? Asked the Wizard of Oz as he strolled somberly into the throne room. Yes, I'm ready, came Nick Chopper's familiar voice. I feel sorry for you, Nick, the wizard said. You'll have to face a cruel, seemingly inhuman beast who is totally incapable of pity or mercy. Thanks, wizard, the Tin Woodman said sarcastically. Now I feel much better. And watch that beast stuff, growled the cowardly lion. The wizard turned towards Omby Amby. Please go and call Boldkey into the throne room. Come in, said the soldier, and escorted the Munchkin to his seat. The merchant smiled coldly, ignoring the hostile glares from the Ozmites. Boldkey, the wizard began, I think, and the citizens of the city think so as well, that you are just pretending this cruelty, and at the last moment, you will show your true kindness. You will give up the forfeit, which, as we all know, is a pound of the Emperor's tin, and then release a portion of the debt, which has caused him such problems for him these past 3 months. In other words, Boldkey, we all expect a kind answer. I have told you what I want, Boldkey said, and I still intend to get it. Perhaps you will ask me why I would rather have a pound of useless tin. At this, the Tin Woodman got up and was about to protest, but was soothed by the Scarecrow and sat back down. Instead of 3,000 Ozpence? Now, you needn't ask me why I feel this way, but I will give no other reason except for a long hatred and loathing for this man of tin. Is that good enough for you? That's no answer, the wizard cried, to excuse your cruelty. I don't have to give you a pleasing answer, Boldkey asserted. Do all men wish to destroy things that they don't love? asked the wizard in frustration. Maybe you think that you're reasoning with Boldkey, called out the Tin Woodman, but you might as well ask the water why it runs downhill, or ask the trees why they rustle in the wind, as try to soften his heart. Even I, with the kind heart that you yourself gave me, was unable to change his mind. So just get on with it and let the Munchkin have his due. Jack Pumpkinhead rose. For the 3,000 Ozpence that you want, I will give you 6,000 Ozpences worth of pumpkins. Boldkey frowned at him. If you cut every pumpkin into 6 parts and gave me a pumpkin for every one of those parts, I would still take the 1 pound of tin. Jack looked confused. Why would I cut up the pumpkins, he asked. They're no good unless they're fresh. The wizard interrupted. Princess Ozma has always been merciful to you. Why don't you grant a much smaller mercy? I have done nothing wrong, Boldkey sneered. The wizard patted his brow nervously with a handkerchief. I should dismiss this court immediately until Princess Ozma returns from her journey to Ix. The servant cried out, Your wizardship, there's a young man here to see you. He claims that he has a message from the princess. Let him in, said the Wizard of Oz. You see, Nick, whispered the Scarecrow. Ozma didn't forget about us. Things are looking up. I wish we could just get this over with, snapped the Tin Woodman. The two glanced up as a disheveled young boy in tattered clothing, too small for him, dashed into the throne room. Excuse me, he said, but I have a message from Princess Ozma. He took from the pocket of his coat a green letter wax. The wizard accepted the letter with a stern, thank you, boy. He opened the letter and read it hastily. A frown creased his forehead, and presently he looked up. This letter recommends a young lawyer for the Tin Woodman. Where is he? I am his clerk, sir, said the young boy, and he's outside. Let him in, said the wizard. Now the court shall hear Ozma's letter. He began to read. Hi, everybody. As you know, I'm currently attending the party of Queen Zixie of Ix, and I'm having a marvelous time. At her palace, I happened to meet a young man of Ozian descent known as Balthazar. I informed him of the problem, and I found him not only well-informed, but also quite opinionated. This leads me to urge you to allow him to serve as the Woodman's defense attorney, but I leave him to your acceptance. Love, Ozma. P.S. Jellia says to say hello. Wish you were here. Well, I'm certainly glad she's having fun, muttered the Tin Woodman. The young clerk looked toward him and smiled. Well, said the wizard, Ozma seems to think quite highly of him, so I see no reason not to let him in. The young lawyer was escorted in. He was a handsome young man and seemed quite confident despite rather ill-fitting clothes and a shrill voice. You're welcome here, said the Scarecrow. Are you fully acquainted with the case? Yes, I am, said Balthazar. He strolled toward the Munchkin merchant, followed closely by the timid young clerk. Where are the merchant and the woodchopper? I'm Boldkey, but I'm now a moneylender. I'm Nick Chopper, but I'm currently the Emperor of the Winkies. Boldkey, the lawyer faced the evil Munchkin. You have a strange case. I believe that you have been a moneylender for some time, and in all previous transactions, you were trustworthy. By Ozian law, not withhold what you are due. Woodman, do you confess that the bond is legal? Yes, said the Tin Woodman. Then, Boldkey, said Balthazar calmly, please be merciful. Balthazar began to pace across the floor of the throne room. Then he looked up and began in a clear voice. The quantity of money is now strained. There is far less money in Oz than is needed for all of the improvements that we are currently undertaking. This lack of money hurts both the debtor and the creditor. It is because of this that Nick Chopper was unable to pay back the 3,000 Ozpence. But surely he will be able to get enough money at a later time. If you could only extend the deadline, the full amount will be repaid. Balthazar, burst the Tin Woodman, I can offer him 9,000 Ozpence from good Princess Ozma. Yes, that is 3 times the sum. And he refused. Boldkey was furious. I signed a legal agreement with Nick Chopper and Jack Pumpkinhead They were unable to repay me within 3 months' time, and I demand to have my bond fulfilled. Bold Key, may I ask you this? Balthazar pursued. Why are you so insistent upon taking a pound of tin? The Munchkin swallowed hard. The courtroom was shocked to see him choking back tears. Finally, he raised his head to speak. All right, I shall tell you. The reason is this. Long ago, when I was just a young man, I lived in a small Munchkin village. The most beautiful girl in the town was named Nimmy Amy. I soon fell deeply in love with this wonderful girl, and she fell in love with me. He stopped and lowered his eyes as though it were too difficult for him to go on. However, Nimmy Amy worked for the Witch of the East, and she could not marry a nameless peasant. So I went out into the country and accumulated a great fortune, becoming a powerful Munchkin and gaining the favor of the Wicked Witch. At last, the witch consented to our marriage, for I promised to give her 2 sheep and a cow at our wedding. Only 2 weeks before the wedding, however, Nimmy Amy told me she had fallen in love with another man, and she broke off our engagement. I was bitterly disappointed, so I left that cursed village behind me, hoping someday to win her back and wreak revenge upon the man who had stolen her from me. You see, my name is not really Bold Key, it is Marvin, and the man upon whom I vowed revenge is Nick Chopper. Gasps and growls of horror filled the courtroom. The Tin Woodman leaped to his feet. Marvin, that's really you? The last time I saw you, you were just a scrawny weakling. Bold Key smiled. Insult me as you wish, but remember that I have the power to cut off 1 pound of your tin. Such ridicule will only strengthen my resolve. The Scarecrow turned to his old friend. That Nimmy Amy was the girl that you had loved, Nick, but I thought that she worked for an old woman, not the witch herself, and that the woman was going to give the witch 2 sheep and a cow. The Tin Woodman seemed as amazed as the others. That was exactly what Nimmy Amy always told me. Marvin, I never knew that you were in love with Nimmy. Perhaps she was ashamed to tell me that she had left you for me. And besides, I never married her. I lost my real heart, and when the wizard gave me a new one, it was kind rather than loving. Bold Key shook his head, unmoved. You still stole her from me. I cannot forgive you. The fact that you lost her yourself was your own fault. I still insist upon the bond. I'm afraid that Bold Key's in the right, Balthazar said solemnly. If we deny him his legal right, it might set a dangerous legal precedent. Well, what's a legal precedent? Asked Jack Pumpkinhead. Balthazar smiled kindly. It simply means that in the future, if anyone finds any law of Oz disagreeable, he might choose to ignore it, and we couldn't have that. Therefore, I say that Bold Key deserves 1 pound of tin from the body of Nick Chopper. Hey, I thought you were supposed to defend me, shouted the Tin Woodman. My duty was to decide the case fairly, said Balthazar. Give Bold Key the tin shears. I see that you are an honorable young man, praised Bold Key. Thank you for upholding the law. Let me see the bond, Balthazar said. After that, Bold Key may proceed. The Munchkin merchant eagerly handed him the document, and he gazed at it carefully. Wizard, the Scarecrow asked pleadingly. I'm afraid Balthazar is right, said the Wizard of Oz. Sorry, Nick. Balthazar's young clerk picked up the tin shears and handed them to Bold Key. The vengeful Munchkin held them lovingly and strode over to the Tin Emperor. A pound of tin, he muttered menacingly, and I shall cut it from your chest, closest to your heart. Nick said nothing. He just clasped the Scarecrow's hand. May I proceed, worthy Balthazar? Bold Key asked eagerly. Yes, said the young lawyer. There's only one restriction. This bond allows you to take only tin. Therefore, you may not cut through the Tin Woodman's nickel plating. If you do so, the bond will be disregarded and all of your property will be confiscated. The Tin Woodman smiled. I'm entirely nickel plated. Hooray, Nick, cried Jack Pumpkinhead. We're saved. A stunned silence filled the court, followed by excited chatter. Only Boldkey seemed disappointed. Go ahead, Boldkey, roared the cowardly lion. Take it. You insisted upon justice, said Balthazar with the slightest trace of a smile. You have received it. O worthy Balthazar, how can I ever repay you? The Tin Woodman asked gratefully. You needn't repay me, dear Nick, said Balthazar. He turned and grabbed his young clerk by the hand. Then the two climbed the throne and stood before the entire crowd. Balthazar put both hands upon his waist and muttered, Magic belt, reveal our true identities. Ozma, exclaimed the wizard, and Jellia Jam, you two were supposed to be in Ix. Well, I changed my mind, Ozma said. I just couldn't stay away with making all of this trouble. I'm sorry for doubting you, Ozma, the Tin Woodman said, but why didn't any of us recognize you? The prince smiled. I commanded the magic belt to prevent you from realizing who we were. Thank you, Father, said Jack Pumpkinhead. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come. Ozma raised her hand. Silence, everyone. I have seen ample evidence here today of the negative effects of money on Ozian society. Therefore, as of this moment, I hereby forbid the use of any money in Oz. It shall all be burned or melted down to make something more useful. And as for Boldkey, the Merchant of Oz sat fearfully on the floor. Boldkey, you were once a good man, but because of one sad happening in your life, you allowed selfishness and hate to overcome you. Therefore, I order you to follow me. Ozma motioned briskly with her hand. The princess strode from the throne room and down the palace steps, followed closely by of curious spectators. She walked down a path which appeared to be newly paved and entered a courtyard in the middle of which stood a large fountain. At the edge of the fountain stood a gold cup. Ozma picked up the cup and dipped it into the water. Drink this, she ordered. Don't worry, it's clear, fresh water. Hesitantly, the munchkin accepted the cup. With one last scathing look at the Tin Woodman, he gulped down the water. Ozma, said the Scarecrow, I don't remember this fountain. Boldkey looked at him with a childish smile. I don't remember anything. The ruler of Oz smiled. It is as I suspected. I recently rediscovered this ancient fountain, overgrown and silent, and I ordered the royal gardener to restore it. I thought that it would turn out to be the Fountain of Oblivion. Fountain of what? Asked Jack Pumpkinhead. The long-forgotten Fountain of Oblivion, the Scarecrow interrupted. I have heard of it. Anyone who drinks of its waters instantly forgets everything he has ever known, as has our friend Bold Marvin. Is that me? Asked the former money lender in wonderment. Yes, said Princess Ozma. From now on, you will be known simply as Marvin, and as you can no longer be a moneylender now that money has been abolished in Oz, I hereby appoint you as the head butler in the Tin Woodman's palace. Thank you, Your Majesty, sobbed Marvin. A sigh of approval emanated from the crowd. That magic fountain is sure neat, said the Wizard of Oz as everyone began to leave the courtyard. What is even better is that Ozma has once again proven her total kindness and compassion, chimed in TikTok. Yep, purred the Hungry Tiger. Disgusting, isn't it? Chapter 5. Several months later, the Tin Woodman's palace had just been completed, and he invited his friends from the Emerald City to a banquet in honor of the occasion. Most of the people in Oz are adjusting quite well to life without money, Ozma announced proudly. It is because people have become so contented in your reign, they no longer need money for security, said the wizard. I certainly don't miss my post as Royal Treasurer of Oz, said the Scarecrow. A servant dressed in gold livery came out for the Tin Woodman. Has everything been served to your liking, Your Majesty? He asked. Yes, it is wonderful, said the Tin Man. Thank you, Marvin. That is another matter I wish to discuss, said Princess Ozma after the former Voltki had retired to another room. Now that Marvin lives here and poor Margolot is gone forever, their house lies empty. The wizard has suggested that I turn it into a jail to deal with any future infractions of the law. A jail, gasped the Scarecrow, but that goes against all of the principles and ideals of the Land of Oz. Not an ordinary jail, Ozma corrected. This will be a place where the prisoner will be treated kindly and realize that it is much better to do good than to break the law. Therefore, I will need someone kindly and helpful to serve as the jailer. Omby Amby, Captain General of the Royal Army of Oz, raised his hand. I think my wife, Tollydiggle, would be the perfect one to fill the since she is the kindest and sweetest woman in Oz. The plump woman sitting beside him at the table began to blush. Why, Omby Amby, you're such a sweetheart. Everyone at the table laughed. It was common knowledge that while Tollydiggle was delightful in public, she scolded her husband mercilessly at home. That settles it, Ozma announced. Tollydiggle, I now appoint you Royal Jailer of Oz. Everyone began to clap. Suddenly, Professor Wogglebug jumped to his feet and pointed toward the doorway. Look. The Ozites could not believe their eyes. There, slightly the worse for wear, stood Margolot and an elderly wizard whose limbs were so crooked that he could barely stand upright. Hello, everyone, Margolot said wearily. I suppose you thought I was gone forever. This is my husband, Dr. Nicodic. The professor rushed forward in awe. The same Dr. Nicodic who created the famous wishing pills? The same one, chuckled the old man. I am very pleased to meet you, exclaimed the bug. Now, wait a minute, Ozma commanded. How did you both survive falling into a bottomless canyon? It was easy, my dear. Halfway down the precipice, I transformed us both into birds, and we flew away. We've been living in the forest for weeks, Margolot said. We only came out of hiding because I wanted to see my father, and I heard that he was working here. I have to tell him how sorry I am for leaving him so careless. I don't think that will be necessary, Ozma said, smiling. What do you mean? Margolot asked nervously. You see, my dear, your father's memory is gone. He doesn't remember you or the fact that you have eloped. I see no reason to cause him more pain for something that he has put behind him. May I still see him? Margolot asked. Of course, said the Tin Woodman. He rang a tin bell before him. Marvin hurried into the room. Yes, Your Majesty, there's someone here to see you. Father, Margolot said, rushing forward. Who are you? Asked Marvin, seeming bewildered to receive an embrace from the strange woman. Why, I am Margolot, your daughter, and this is my husband, Dr. Nicodic. I'm sorry, I don't remember. Oh, what a shame. It was such a lovely wedding. Don't rush, Nick, Jack Pumpkinhead cautioned as he saw the Tin Woodman begin to cry. I can't help it, said the Emperor. I always cry at reunions. While Margolot and her father were becoming reacquainted, Ozma sternly summoned Dr. Nicodic. First, Nicodic, you violated one of my most important laws. Only the Wizard of Oz and Glinda are permitted to practice magic. Not only did you use sorcery, but you used it for deception. I'm sorry, Princess Ozma, stammered the magician. I will forgive you, but only if you absolutely promise never to use magic again. I promise, Princess Ozma, said Dr. Nicodic, but I must ask you to keep the fact that we are alive strictly secret. I have a good many enemies, and now they think I am dead. If they find out about me, don't worry, Ozma said soothingly. We won't tell anyone. Secondly, how do you plan to provide for Margolot? She deserves a good home, and you can't live in the forest forever. Yes, you're right. You see, I've always dreamed of owning a farm in the Munchkin country. We both think that it is the most beautiful land in Oz, but I could never do that. I have too many enemies, in Munchkinland to live there. Well, I think I can fix that, Ozma said. Why don't you just change your name? No one would suspect a married man with a different name to be the same person as Dr. Nicodic. What a good idea. I changed my name to Dr. Pipt. That was my mother's maiden name, and I've always liked it better than Nicodic. And I'm sure I could find you a tidy little farm which is isolated enough to keep you secure, Ozma said. Oh, let me tell Margolot the good news, Dr. Pipt said. There's only one thing I don't understand, the Scarecrow said thoughtfully. How can you fall halfway down a bottomless ravine? The end. This was my story, The Merchant of Oz, published in Oziana in 1993. And I'd like to thank the International Wizard of Oz Club for inviting me to read it as part of their anniversary celebrations.